So, had a delivery from UPS, compliments of Luke Taylor and Polymaker. Take a look at this. Fantastic. Thanks, Luke. Really appreciate that. So now I've got some more filaments to play with. Exotic and expensive ones at that. So I made a start and printed something with ABS, which I wasn't quite sure how well that would work out because I don't have a heated chamber as such. Although the printer is enclosed in a booth, but more on that later. Anyway, here's how that went. So, as you can see, not great because there was a problem with retraction. You can see that it started off okay, but then as the print progressed, the retraction started to get less and less effective. Took me a little while to work out what was going on. I kept increasing the retraction as the print progressed, but it didn't make any difference. And then finally I tweaked. So I loaded ABS into one of the inputs, but the other 5 inputs still had PLA. And that PLA had been in there a long time before I even started this print. And I printed it using 255 degree nozzle temperature and 210 in the combining block. So basically all that PLA was held at print temperature. And I mentioned this before, PLA is a problem with multi-input hot ends because it hydrolyzes as it's held at temperature. It gets more and more runny over time. So that's what happened in this case. The PLA that was in the combining block, shall we say, got more and more runny and it just started to run out. So with a mixing hot end or a multi-input hot end, you have to retract all the filaments concurrently because otherwise it just pulls filament from one of the other inputs rather than the nozzle. It doesn't relieve pressure on the nozzle if you don't retract them all. So what had happened here is the PLA had got really runny. It was just mixing with the filament that was being pushed through. It just ran out of the combining block, leaving a void effectively. So that when retraction happened, it was retracting the ABS, but it wasn't actually retracting the other filaments because of this void that was in the combining block. So that PLA was actually contaminating the ABS at the beginning of the print. If you look closely at this picture, you can actually see where it's been retracting. You can see blobs of something that aren't grey ABS. Anyway, that's what happened, and it's an easy fix. Just basically don't load all the other inputs of PLA. It is a problem with multi-input hot ends because of this hydrolyzing thing. So when I get the other inputs loaded with other filaments, this won't be the problem because they won't hydrolyze as bad. There might still be a problem from time to time, but just periodically pausing the print and purging the other filaments will fix that. Anyway, apart from that, the print went quite well. First time I've tried ABS with this nozzle. So as I say, I was a bit concerned that I don't actually have a heated chamber, but there's no sign of warping. It's stuck to the bed well. Well, the chamber was quite warm. I ran the bed at 90 degrees. I've got one of these minimum maximum greenhouse type thermometer things which I hung in the cabinet, so you can see it started off at quite a low ambient of about 18.5 degrees, but it reached 37. So that's just the heating from the build plate inside the booth, if you see what I mean. So before I go too much further with these filaments, I noticed that some of them are quite hygroscopic. In fact, Luke from Polymaker warned me about the polydissolve, saying it really does absorb water, moisture. So before I open them all up and start playing with them, I don't really want to ruin them. So I want to look at putting a dehumidifying the booth that the printer sits in. Here's a picture of the booth itself. So it's about 1.5 metre, no, it's about a metre wide, metre front to back, and 2 metres tall, roughly 2 cubic metres. Then at the side of the printer I've got a rack like this that I store all the filament in. So, and of course the other thing is, with having 6 inputs and all inputs have to be loaded, I end up with 6 open reels of filament on the machine itself. And I'm not very disciplined at taking them off at the end of the print and putting them back in their boxes, so they tend to sit there forever. So the ideal thing for me will be if I come up with a mechanism to reduce the relative humidity inside that cabinet. It's pretty well sealed. It's got seals all around the door, so when the doors are closed there aren't any gaps. But I want to actually look at properly measuring the humidity inside that cabinet and controlling it. Ideally get it down to around about 15% RH, and then I can store the filament in there. I can leave it on the printer and I can print, and I know that everything's going to be good. So that's probably one of my next priorities, is to do that before I go too much further. I've done a bit of research, and I've discovered so far that a compressor type dehumidifier won't get down to the kind of RH values that I'm looking at. Looks like I need a desiccant rotor type or something like that. I've got some of those open desiccant things that you just put whatever is, some chemical, sodium chloride or something or other, inside it that absorbs moisture, but I just need to do something a bit better than that. So then one other thing, the filament that sits on the machine, it's kind of designed to take 1 kilogram spools, and a couple of the spools that Luke sent me are those big 3 kilogram jobbies. So I thought about modifying the machine to take those spools, but then potentially would I want 18 kilograms of filament hanging off the side of the printer? Probably not. So I just decided in the end it would be easier to wind the filament from the big spool into some spare 1 kilogram spools that I got kicking around, which is what those ABS cylinders are for. This is how that went. So that's where I am at the moment. I think probably fairly high priority is going to be to look at modest heating and certainly humidity control inside the booth. And then the other thing I've got coming up is this Australia trip. which we're going to be out of the country for a few weeks. Hopefully, if we get there and if PCR tests are negative and all the other paperwork is in order. So it might be a little while before I do any more videos after this one. But as ever, thank you for those who've supported me, and anybody that wants to support me, there's links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts down the bottom. So I'll get back to you as soon as I can.